So it's a process of presenting or removing something that increases or maintains the likelihood of that a behavior will occur again in the future. So again, my example of my open door policy for students, I was reinforcing that behavior for the students, being removed from the classroom, being removed from certain teachers' classrooms, right? And so that only strengthens behavior. And I love this component that Catherine is all about, is behavior goes where the reinforcement flows. So really the idea, right? We sometimes as educators, we may not realize we're really enforcing that behavior, right? It could be a student who loves to get out of math and you're like, okay, gosh, it's always so difficult this time. You can leave Catherine and go to another classroom, right? Or you can leave Catherine and go to the office. Well, Catherine is really getting what she wants, right? She's essentially leaving that classroom and not partaking in that lesson and or really participating in that math component that needs to happen, right? And so we have to be really cognizant of that as well, because we want to reinforce the behavior that we do want to see, right? And so just being aware of that, I think will really help us kind of glean on and understanding really behavior and that continuum that happens. Catherine, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you always give this beautiful example of how you were just trying to help at your school site. You were trying to do your best, right? And I know, all of us here have been in that place of, I'm just trying to help my student, right? You are trying to implement interventions and strategies with fidelity, with consistency. You're doing your best, you're planning your lesson, you're trying to support your students. But sometimes when we don't know that the function of their behavior is, for example, to escape, we might be inadvertently reinforcing that behavior. As Natalie said, all of our behaviors fall under the functions that she discussed earlier. We are either, if you look at the top part, we are either trying to get positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, meaning positive reinforcement gets something, attention or a tangible object or an activity, or we're trying to get negative reinforcement in the form of relief. I'm trying to get out of this aversive situation. I don't like math. I don't like my classroom. I don't like this group. I don't like this little pod. So I'm trying to escape or avoid that task. And that's what negative reinforcement is. And as Natalie said, reinforcement strengthens behavior. It is basically the vitamins, the protein shake of behavior. So anytime a behavior increases, whether it's a behavior you like or you don't like, that means it's getting reinforced, right? Because it's the protein shake of behavior. It cannot not work. By definition, it works. So sometimes we might hear a colleague say, I've tried everything with that Natalie kid and she just, oh no, nothing works for her. No reinforcement works for her. What we want to reflect on is, maybe we just haven't found the right reinforcement or reinforcer that Natalie wants to work for, right? Because anytime the behavior of Natalie increases or is maintained, something or someone is reinforcing it. Maybe when I send Natalie to the office, she sees the yard supervision folks and they're like, hey, Natalie, you're out again? Girl, we see you all the time. And maybe she likes the attention instead of escape. Maybe she's not really trying to escape the task, but she knows she's going to be able to kind of chit chat with the folks outside. Or maybe she is trying to escape the task and we think it's attention. So we're trying to remove her from getting attention is what we think, but she's trying to escape the task. So the importance of knowing the function helps us figure out what intervention or what our next steps are so we can meet the student need. And then, the reinforcement is something, like I said, probably the best consequence we can provide, right? Natalie might love sushi. Some folks might not love sushi. So if our boss says, Natalie and Catherine, you have to stay, and Natalie, I'll give you sushi. Catherine doesn't like sushi. Catherine's not staying, right? And so it's the same in our classroom. Sometimes we have amazing stickers, amazing pencils, amazing tickets, but then what are those tickets getting exchanged for example, right? Is it something that students want to work for? And it's not always something we have to spend money on, but we got to survey and ask our students what they might want to work for. Otherwise, just like us, we're not going to work for something we don't like, right? Or it's not going to be as motivating for us to work for something that we're not interested in.
Mhm.
So now we'll move on to prevention strategies. And we talked about the ABCs of behavior earlier. And our prevention strategies is a match to our antecedent. And we talked about our antecedent, that behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it refers to our environment, right? And so when we look at our environment or our antecedent interventions, the first thing we want to remind our folks here today is we want to identify and describe consistent classroom routines. What does that mean? Sounds easy, but that's big, right? Because if we say that the science tells us behavior is your response to what's happening in your environment, that's why sometimes behaviors at home are different from the school. That is possible because the academic demands are different at school and home, and also the environment is different in school and home, for example, right? And so we want to make sure that we set up our environment for our students' success. Did we set up our environment so that our students can be successful? Did we remind our students or teach them in the first place how to enter the classroom? What does it mean to turn in your homework? Are you just like holding it up? Is someone walking around collecting it? Are you putting it in a folder? Are the folders getting passed or collected every Friday? Or are you putting it in a bin? How do you put away materials? Are you just putting it under your desk? Is someone passing? I don't know, I'm dating myself, where I went to a different school where we are passing everything forward and someone's collecting it in the front. And I love to be that kid collecting all the papers. Love it, right? But is that what we have in our classroom, right? How do we request assistance? Do we just raise our hand? Do we have a thumbs up sign? Do we have a paper that we hold up? Or do we have a buzzer or a bell? Or do we just get up and get the pass? How do we complete independent work? Where do we complete independent work? Can we stay in our seats? Can we go on the carpet? Can we go in the reading area? Can we sit by our friend when it's independent work time or when it's group time? What does that mean? What does that look like? When there's a visitor coming in, principal's knocking, everybody's talking, and teacher has to say, hold their hand up because you're talking to an adult, right? I've done that so many times. And now looking back, I'm thinking, why didn't I have a routine for that? I know that can happen, right? We can't predict everything that can happen during our day, fire drill, all kinds of stuff, but those that we can predict, we can prepare for and teach our students what that might look like. What do I do when there's a substitute teacher? And I know, back in the day when I was in the classroom, I would always get little love notes from my substitute teacher. And I already know what the letter will say and who the student she's going to talk about or he's going to talk about. And she'll say, Natalie was out of her seat all day. How do you do this? All kinds of stuff. But then reflecting on my practices when I was a very, very new teacher, I'm thinking I should have reflected more on how, yes, I teach my students the routines when I'm there, but I also want to make sure I extend that and help my students generalize when I'm not there. Generalize it in settings. They don't just act and engage in our routine when I'm there, also when I'm not there. That's the true test. If your students are able to follow your consistent routine that you've taught them, right? Even when you're not there, they know. They know where the folders go. They know who the real line leader is that day. They know who the real phone monitor is that day. And, we can't prevent all behavior, challenging behavior from happening, but we can prevent most if our routine is solid. So when we reflect on identifying and describing classroom routines, consider what you want students to do in your classroom from the moment they walk into the door and the moment they leave. What does that look like? And if you figure out what that looks like, you want to make sure you teach it, provide opportunities to practice. And then when they engage in those behaviors, you reinforce those behaviors.
And Catherine, don't forget the role of a heart monitor. This is the first, like a heart.
Oh, I love
Monitor
it.
their individuals, yeah, that check in. Should they see a student that's sad or upset
Oh, I
or
love
like,
that.
right? Those are your genuine kind of students that you're like, you know what, they really could use a little support, or who are sitting by themselves. So I have seen that and I have loved that. I probably would have been that role growing up. Heart monitors, what that was.
Heart monitor. So I'm the paper collector, and Natalie is the heart monitor.
There you
Before.
go.
All right. So our next one is embedding choice. Right? You see a choice board here in front of you. This is for our younger learners, but obviously, if we have a little bit more, middle school and high school, the choice board, or it could even just be a contingency map where they could pick what they're gonna do next. Embedding choice is something that research tells us supports our students that are oppositional defiant, or students whose behaviors are maintained by escape. Natalie trying to escape the task, providing choice will promote academic engagement and prevent and decrease problem behavior. Now, is that just us saying, what do you want to do first? And I thought about this the other night when I was asking my son what shirt he wants to wear, and I gave him two options. And you've probably done this either with your children or students or significant others. What do I wear? They pick the other one, but you really want to wear the other one, and you're like, okay, you want this other one, right? It's not a choice like that where you really want them to pick something else, but it's also not a choice where it's a free for all. Right? We want to make sure we provide a structured choice. For example, we can ask them which activity you want to accomplish first, right? You want to write the paragraph first, you want to draw first. What materials do you want to use? If it's not going to make or break your lesson, if it's not a lesson about markers, let them use a marker instead of a pen or a pencil, right? If that's something that could give them that sense of autonomy, that sense of ownership, having that choice. If it doesn't make or break your lesson, also you can ask them, do you want to work independently or with a group? Where do you want to work in the classroom? You can have a choice between the reading area or the kidney table in the back. You want to ask how students will respond. Universal design for learning tells us we want to make sure we provide our students with multiple opportunities to respond, multiple opportunities to show us that they've acquired the skill that we've given them or that we've taught them. And so what does that look like? If we are teaching them, for example, about, being healthy, in light of COVID, right? How do we be healthy? How are we being healthy and safe? Some folks might interview the nurse and they report on that. Some folks might make a little pamphlet. What are the steps to be healthy? Washing your hands, what does that look like? Some might make a song. Some might do a role play, right? But all of those things can give them a choice on how they're going to show you, I learned the skill that you've asked me to do, right? And think about it, interspersing choice all throughout the day for students is something that if we can, we should provide, because normally they don't really get a choice, right? If we really think about it. They wake up, their moms or dads or caregivers will say, wake up, Natalie, time to get your backpack, make sure your homework's in there, grab your breakfast, get in the car. We're walking to school or driving to school. Once they get to the school, the yard person will say, all right, let me see. Okay, line up over here. This is where your line is. Wait for your teacher. When the teacher picks them up on the yard, teacher says, you sit here. This is what we're doing first. Make sure you do this, 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 this. We very rarely get a choice all throughout the day. And if research is telling us providing choice and embedding choice is what's going to support our students to promote academic engagement, and it can prevent and decrease problem behavior, we should intersperse choice more. So, math example. If you're a math teacher and I'm your student, or Natalie is your student, and you need for us to solve 5 math problems,